our last video, we finished up the 700 block of Lapeer Avenue, and now we come to the intersection of 8th Street and Lapeer. Before we go any further down Lapeer Avenue, we want to take a little detour down 8th Street and look at one of the oldest churches in the city of Port Huron, and that's the First Presbyterian Church on the corner of Wall and 8th Street. This church has a very unique story of its beginning. About 10 years after this photograph was taken, 22 people in the little town of Port Huron gathered together to form the United Presbyterian Congregation of Port Huron. This was on August 19, 1868. Various halls were used the first several years for gathering and worship, and in 1871, a church building was dedicated at the corner of Broad, or now McMorran, and Michigan Streets. You can't see the church in this photograph, but in this photograph here, taken in the early 1900s, if you look closely as we zoom in, you'll see the tower of this church projecting above the skyline of downtown Port Huron. By 1887, it was decided to switch allegiances from the United Presbyterian Church and join the Presbyterian Church of the USA. This was, however, not a unanimous decision, and feelings were strong on both sides. The church building, located on McMorran, was the property of the United Presbyterian Church. You can see in this Sanborn map from 1898 the exact location. The members that were loyal to the old Presbyterian Church retained the building because they owned it, and those who favored the change were in need of a meeting place. While waiting for the new church to be built, services took place at the Maccabees building, which later on would become the Algonquin Hotel. And the church that was on the corner of Michigan and McMorran became defunct. The church building would later go on to become a car dealership, a Hudson dealership, actually owned by Al Mudge, which was H&H Auto Sales. I don't have a photo of the church when it was a church, but I do when it was the auto dealership, thanks to Scott Barton in these photos that he shared. The H&H Auto Sales car dealership was there in the 1930s and 40s and even into the 50s. Here's a photo from a little different angle, and as you go up to the top of the church, this tower looks a little out of kilter, actually. I'm not sure what's going on there. The H&H car dealership was there in the 1930s and perhaps even before that, also in the 1940s and even into the 1950s. In this photograph here, it looks like it might be the grand opening because of all the flowers that are displayed. But in the early 1920s, Triangle Motor Sales was there. It was also a Hudson dealership, but it also sold the Essex car. And here you see an advertisement. At some point, the church was either torn down or possibly burned down, and a new building was constructed on the same site, which you see here, which I imagine was quite an improvement for a Hudson dealer. And that building is still there today. Of course, it's been remodeled, and we know it today as the Port Huron Paint Company. All right, we've digressed a little bit from the church history to the history of the building, but it's all history, and it's good to know. At least I'm interested in it, and I'm sure you are too. The current church, which sits on the corner of 8th and Wall Street, was built in 1895, and this is what it looks like today. And this is what it looked like in 1895 when the church was being built. This church has had quite a legacy.